joining us, Brigitte.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
We might not have an introduction for you. Just saying.
That's all right. Yeah. So
So
networking is a powerful tool. And it is something that isn't really taught in school. Construction is or I guess the AEC industry is really built on relationships. It's a relationship industry. And I think it's something that networking is that tool that really gets people out there and meeting new people and developing relationships, which will lead to, I guess, success in your career in this industry.
agreed. We don't do it alone, right? No building gets built on by itself.
Right. I mean, think of how many parties are involved, and if you can't communicate with other people, then you're gonna have a really hard time.
Well, it's true. And there's so many skill sets that come to the table, right? And so many different ways of thinking. It's like it's the perfect example of collaboration and synergy and innovation. Just the fact that anything gets built.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right.
So why this topic? I mean, yes, it's important. What kind of lit a fire under you that this was a workshop that you wanted to do?
I think so. When I started out in the industry, I was kind of a worker bee, and I pretty much did anything that anyone asked me to do. And up until I shadowed a few senior superintendents during, I guess, the inception of a project, I didn't really realize the importance of building relationships. And that's not just within my own company. Of course, that's important, but with all the stakeholders of a project. And I think, when you're managing trades and contractors, you're communicating like we had alluded to with suppliers and, the different project managers for those trades, but you don't really get exposed to the end users or the client necessarily. And I think if you want to grow your business or grow your career, then you need to meet those people who could potentially hire you in the future, or who could introduce you to other people and you could build that reputation for yourself within your organization and your organization as a whole.
So I think that sometimes building relationships, particularly in like a networking environment, it's kind of like it's not, you're there and then you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be awesome and meet people. That's great. It's different than, meeting someone kind of naturally or organically. You kind of are putting yourself in this situation that doesn't quite feel natural. For many of us, it doesn't feel natural. For other people, they're like, oh, this is awesome. I'm gonna, I'm in my best self right now and I don't know anybody in the room. I am not like that. But like, what's the process you go through in a situation like that to try to resonate and meet people?
So when we go to conferences or other industry events, I think what's really important is to recognize that we're all there for a reason. And I think you kind of hit it on the head with networking has a negative connotation in a lot of cases because you kind of see it as sleazy or you're there to get something out of it. But I think we need to take a step back. Everybody needs to take a step back and realize networking is really just building relationships. And I think when I approach those situations at conferences or events, I just like to meet people for who they are. I mean, everyone is in this industry for a reason, and something keeps them there, right? And so I think one thing we can all do in this industry at these events is ask each other why. And I think we'll find a lot of commonalities, and we'll be able to relate as individuals, as people, like the human side of things, rather than I want to get something out of this relationship.
So what tips do you have for people in, that first 30 seconds or even before, kind of like the 60 seconds before you approach someone?
Oh, Well, I always think that you should know a little bit more about the person you're meeting, which is hard in some cases, because in an event where there's 200 plus people, you might not be able to research that many people. But I do think within the first 60 seconds, 30 seconds, I think that you should have a human conversation with them. And I also think it shouldn't be about their work. I think it should be relatable to the person as an individual, not necessarily what do you do. Like, I don't think the first question coming out of your mouth at a conference or anything should be, what do you do? Because I feel like we all are there for a reason, again, but if you want to build a relationship with somebody, you should get to know that person before you find out what they do. So to see if your values align, or just to build that relationship on another level before you start getting into the work side of things.
So then what's worked for you? Okay, so that's kind of the approach, the first little chunk of time. And basically I'll surmise and put my own twist on it, which is something I always do. Is like, okay, so just be human, right?
Yeah.
Be human and approach people like they're also humans. Just there's your first piece of advice, right?
Absolutely.
And then I think that one of the things that gets awkward, I guess we're kind of focused. Oh, well, I'm focusing on what happens at a conference, because I think that's the scare. Like, that's a great example of what's so scary to people, because it doesn't feel natural. But
Yeah.
So as I think about that, I think about, okay, so one of the challenges that I have felt sometimes is, so when do you end the conversation? Like, I don't want to be the shadow that's like, okay, now I talked to you for 5 minutes and it was great. Now what do I do? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good point. I think that's a hard one. It really just depends on the conversation you're having. You could always have some go-to outs. And I think this actually is relatable just to meeting people in general, right? Like if you're at a bar or if you're at the mall and somebody comes up and talks to you or wherever, right? You should always have a couple outs like, oh, you know what? I really have to run to the restroom. It's great meeting you. Or you could also go, oh, hey, I saw they put out food. I'm going to go grab some, or a drink. And, they're serving drinks. I'm going to go grab one. Do you want one? Or something like that. That could also always give you an out. Or maybe there's a session starting soon that you really want to attend. So I think you could always like plan a couple exit strategies. But it also kind of just depends on how the conversation's going,
Right. Well, I love that advice though, and I've never really thought about it in those terms. Yeah, I'm gonna come prepared with some outs, man. 'Cause that's pretty. It's like there are some times where you know that you've been as charming as you're able.
Yeah.
And it's time to move on, and yet it's always awkward, or you can tell like that person's done talking to you. They're just not entranced with you. So it's like, okay, now I got to figure out how to graciously step away.
Yeah, it was great meeting you, great chatting with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session or conference or whatever. And I wish you the best of luck,
I guess one of your prepared outs too could be, like that can be a good time to give your business card, right? And just say, hey,
Yeah.
it was really great talking to you. Here's my card, if, blah, blah, blah.
If you want to follow up on whatever we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. So that kind of turns the card into like, okay, a flag, I'm done.
Yeah, it's your signal. Physical
Yeah.
signal that you're moving on.
Right. So then that's kind of like approaching someone and being in that crazy, uncomfortable conversation. There's also an element of follow-up on that.
I think that's the hardest part about networking is the follow-up. And I don't think anybody's amazing at it. I really don't. Everybody has not followed up, like everybody has that experience where you get a business card and you just throw it in your desk and that's it. But the important part of networking and building that relationship, again, we think back to what networking is, it's building relationships and exchanging information. Without following up, you're kind of talking to a brick wall, like you leave it at that and then you walk away. or you're putting like a poster on a wall, like, call me. And without following up, you're not building that relationship, you're just leaving it there. And so following up is the most important part of networking. And one thing that you can do, I think there's a couple of skills, right, in following up, or a couple of actions that you can take. You should always reference your conversation that you had at the conference, at the event. One way you can do that is on the card that you receive from the other person is to write a little note on the back and say, we talked about this at this session, or something like that, right after you meet them. That's a common thing. I've seen people do this at conferences. I've chatted with people doing it because I do it too. I do it when I get back to my room, but I do it. and it's great. Like, it gives you a conversation topic to follow up with them about, and you don't need to dive into detail. You could say, let me think of a conversation. I had a conversation with someone who works for the transportation department in New York that I met at a conference last week. And at the end, I took his card and I wrote his information on it. And I said, oh, we chatted about his son at Northeastern. And, and that's local to me because I live in the Boston area. So it was something that I can relate to with him the next time we chat. And so I think following up is so important, but also just bringing it back to that conversation that you had to reference what brought you together in the first place. What is your commonality? Because we all have commonalities, and we could go on about that, but it is something that can help at least build that connection, and then kind of leave it at that for as long as you want to. The relationship, can go as far as you take it. And that's something to also consider. You could follow up and never talk to them for the next 5 years, or you could follow up and then follow up 4 months from now and say, hey, I saw this article about this conversation we were talking about, and I'd love to touch base with you and get your opinion on it. And it could just be that. It could be a 5-minute call, but at least you're staying in touch with that person. Yeah, I think a really important element about maintaining your network is that you're keeping those relationships and referring back to them whenever you need to. They can a lot of times be a fallback. I've joined organizations, professional organizations like the Construction Institute, where I've created relationships with people outside my company. And this is something that I would recommend to professionals like in their mid-career stage. Join these organizations because you can learn so much information from your peers at other organizations, whether that's about your role or where the industry's headed. Maybe they're having supply issues or material shortages that you haven't seen yet on your project. Or maybe you want some career advice from somebody who's outside your company. I think building those relationships within your own organization, of course, on different projects, but also outside of your organization in the industry really helps you learn. And maintain your curiosity for the industry as a whole. Because I think if we're really stuck in our own ways, and if we're really on this one path, then we're not going to be open to learning what's happening, or we might not even just be knowledgeable about what's happening in the industry elsewhere. But also that means, if you maintain those relationships, you're kind of first in mind in a lot of cases in new projects. If someone's putting a project out to bid and you recently contacted them and they're looking for an organization that you're part of, they might reach out to you. And that's huge. That's huge in this industry. But also if they're trying to fill a role within your organization and you're qualified and you recently had a discussion with somebody about how you want to try something new in your career and they have an opening for you, like, hey, I know we just spoke about this and this opportunity came up. I think what it does is it keeps you kind of front of mind in a lot of cases. You're not just sitting back, letting things ride out. You're being, you're being kind of more upfront, and you're, I'm trying to think of the right word here. You're being a little bit more ambitious than maybe your peers in those cases.
Right. And so I think that this particular topic is really interesting when you start looking at, you know, extroverts and introverts, and then the kind of the sub classifications of those people, you know, introverts, extroverts, how they overlap, how they, you know, don't overlap, how they're here and there and everywhere. And there's a good chunk of the personality styles that would feel like they are bothering someone by following up. And I think that thought it's a real thought at first, and then it becomes kind of an excuse, right? So how have you seen in your experience people better who out of the people who are able to push past that idea, like, I don't want to do this outreach or call somebody because I'm telling myself I'm going to be bothering them? What's kind of the self-talk you would advise to people to stop doing that?
That's a good question. I think at the end of the day, if they were at this event or conference, they were there for a reason, and typically it's to meet new people or to learn about their industry. So if you want to follow up with someone and you think you're bothering them, like, what would you be bothering them about? Are you asking them for something? Because a lot of times when you follow up, you shouldn't be asking for something. You should just say, thank you, great meeting you. Glad we talked about this. I'll look for, you know, if something happens in the future related to our conversation, I'd love to, you know, keep in touch. You shouldn't feel like you're bothering them. So if you're reaching out and saying, hey, I want to follow up, I'd love to work at your company. I would see how that, I could see how that could bother, you know, you think you're bothering someone, but I would say your follow-up should just be a thank you and we'll stay in touch. Like it shouldn't, you know, if somebody were to reach out to you and say, thanks, it was great meeting you, I think you would feel pretty good about it. Like, yeah, it was great meeting you. And you don't have to lead the conversation to the next point. You can just leave it at that, you know, just a statement, something that somebody doesn't even need to respond to right now.
And that's first follow-up, right? But if you're going to keep your network healthy, there's second, third, fourth, 10th follow-up. So it kind of, so attend the workshop to figure out ways for a second, third, fourth, and 10th follow-up strategies.
Following up it's really tricky, and it really just depends on what you want out of that conversation. But yeah, you make a great point, and I think if anybody wants to chat more about it, I'm open to it, because I would love to know, you know, understand what you would think is bothering the person that you're reaching out to, just on your follow-up. So we can chat more.
Yeah, but I actually do something similar at conferences. I've decided that it's my job to make sure that no one is standing alone. So I will see someone standing alone and be like, okay, well, you're going up to them because it's your job to make them feel comfortable and introduce them to at least one other person.
Yeah, and that's an incredible way to meet people too, and like-minded people in a lot of cases.
Yes, absolutely. And some of the most interesting conversations have come from those things. But if I didn't tell myself it was my job in that moment, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. And a lot of times when we're in our careers and we don't really know how to start out with networking, I think some people are just like, yeah, go network, go to this event, go to this conference. And I think it's hard if you don't have experience. You don't really know what to do. You kind of just sit there, or you're standing alone, you know, in the corner. And I think the purpose, you know, of my workshop is to make people feel more confident in attending these types of events, but also just to go to these events. Because a lot of cases, we're not signing up for them, or our organizations aren't signing us up for them. So we have to take on that task to sign up for them, to go to these events where that we might be interested in, that might help us grow professionally, or our organizations, develop our organizations further. But I do think, and I hope, you know, an outcome of my workshop is that people will have some steps to take when they leave, so that they don't just sit there, you know, so that they have actionable items that they can walk away with that will help them build that network and just maintain it in general.
No, that's great. And I think that your workshop has a lot to look forward to, because this is an edge for people, and some more than others, obviously. But it is an edge, and it's a great thing to give those tools, because they're tools that help you in many walks of life, you know, just all over the place. And I think that people sometimes forget, if you're really uncomfortable, your easy approach is to a speaker, because they want to, I will tell you, they want to be approached. They want someone to come up to them afterwards and say, hey, even if it's, oh, I really enjoyed it, I got a lot out of it, you know, whatever it is. But that can sometimes help pave the way to, or at least break the ice, so that you're more comfortable speaking to other people. So, and my best engagements are the ones where there's a line of people who want to talk to me. Like, I can't get out of the room because there are so many people who want to talk to me. And that's when you know that you really nailed it. And do I want those people to contact me later? Absolutely. Right. So, I mean, I'm just saying that in a conference, if you're really having trouble breaking that ice, go up to a speaker and say, hey, why are you so passionate about this? Or, you know, whatever it was, or I learned a lot, or what reading do you recommend? That's a really easy question.
Right. You can go prepared to conferences. You can go prepared to events with just general questions. And they're not questions like, what do you do for work? Or what brings you here? But they're genuine questions to learn more about the person and, you know, what they're passionate about. Everyone loves to talk about themselves. Everyone loves to talk about themselves. And so if you ask the right questions to get people to talk about themselves, then you have a conversation starter.
That's true. I read not too long ago this little blurb that said, okay, I might screw this up. So you might paraphrase and make it better. But it surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the person who speaks the most tends to have the best memory of the conversation. Yeah, that's a powerful little trick, isn't it? So if you figure out, like, okay, what are some open-ended questions that I can pop out there so that they're using a larger number of words than I am, they're going to walk away from that conversation
remembering it.
Yeah. It was a good conversation because they got to say the larger number of words. Is that like a simple little brain trick?
Yeah. Send me that article. Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes sense though.
It does. I don't remember where I read. I don't have the article at my fingertips, but it resonated with me. Yeah. I was like, oh, holy crud, Laura. Well, you better start shutting up more often.
Well, no, but I mean, like, people want to be valued. Like, if I'm having a conversation with them, I want them to value our conversation, like especially with something that I really care about. And when we talk about ourselves, it's typically something that's valuable to us or something that we hold to high regard, whether that's about our families or about our careers or about our passions. You know, that's something that is valuable to us and it makes us excited. So that makes sense, you know, in a lot of cases, that when you're talking to somebody that about something that is valuable to them, I mean, of course, yeah, it makes so much sense. Of course, they're gonna remember it.
Yeah, you know, always having these, you know, 3 to 5 little tricks in your head. Like, okay, here's a good few open-ended questions. Make sure I say less than they say, and then have my exit strategy is ready to go, right? Okay, now I can get through any conversation at any time. Oh, I'm really looking forward to your workshop. I think that there's going to be so much interesting thoughts that come out of it. That'll be really good. Is your workshop on the, I should know this question, the answer to this question, but I don't. Is it on the 26th or the 27th?
It's on the 26th.
Oh, that's so awesome. So you get to prep everybody for the happy
Yeah.
hour.
Yes, exactly. And I hope that, people start building those relationships then,
Yeah.
and they can continue them into the next day.
Yes, that's great. And I have such a sick sense of humor. If I was doing it, I would tell them, okay, I'm gonna walk around and I'm gonna give you something.
I'm gonna join your conversation, see what you're talking about. Better not be, what do you do?
That's right.